This is the Meze Alba IEM. When Meze asks me to review a product these days, I almost always jump on the opportunity. They sent this out, but they're not paying me to say anything good or bad. All thoughts and opinions, like always, are my own. Now, at $150, which is what this is priced at, the competition for IEMs is just insane. At $200 and under is where the entire value proposition of IEMs really comes in, and the competition is brutal. And I honestly, at this point, do not believe in a overall recommendation as the best for a group of people with IEMs, just because there are so many options at this price. That being said, I think this is a very good competitor. I think that for some people, this will be probably top 5 in this price category. I'm gonna run you through the sound, and maybe it might be great for you. As far as style points go, I really enjoy the styling of these. They're also notably quite small, and they don't really stick out from your ears. And actually, when they're tucked in, they have a pretty low profile, which I'm a huge fan of. They also have this circular disc that kind of falls into a bit of an inset, what I imagine is an air outlet, and kind of reminds me of a black hole, which is kind of cool. I like it. To be honest, the cable is not great. It just gets tangled really easily. It's a light enough weight, it's high enough quality for the price tag, but doesn't really stand out, nor do the rest of the accessories, just having standard ear tips and a standard carry case. I think overall this has a pretty high-end look that is a little bit understated in my opinion, which is kind of right up my alley for visual preference. I like things that are simple and clean looking, so this is right up my alley for looks. That being said, I also think that the sound quality here is excellent. And like I said before, I think it's gonna be really good for certain people, and maybe not my personal preference, and I'm gonna lay out where those boundaries are different, but yeah, it's a pretty good sound quality as well. It's got a very vivid picture for its overall sound. It hits with a colorful and punchy bass, and a live mid-range, and a speedy sounding treble. Now, most of the sound here is going to be relatively intimate sounding. It's going to have a bit of intensity to it, which gives it kind of a vivid and alive feeling. Even though I'm generally complimentary of the sound quality of this IEM, I am going to start off with a small complaint when it comes to treble timbre. It is a little bit timbre limited, and the timbre does kind of blend together through all the different types of metallics or slightly different frequency ranges. They all sound very similar. There's not a huge diversity between, let's say, 2 different sized triangles, where on certain IEMs and certain headphones, it'd be very obvious, those metallic differences. This is a little bit less obvious. And for the price, it is falling a little bit behind there for me. Now, that being said, when it comes to frequency response of the treble response, it's a bit of a give and take. Largely, this is a really natural and realistic sounding IEM. There's not a whole bunch of kind of fluff and over sharpening in the treble response to make it sound unnatural or enhanced in any way. It sounds very honest, I would say. Now, treble does have a bit of a push forward in between about 12 and 17,000 hertz, which gives it a little bit of an extra kind of environmental vastness to the sound. So you get intense kind of blips here and there that are more intimate, but it also has a bit of a stage to it and a bit of a good room representation that lets things kind of back up into their own environment when they need to. Though it is notable here that, like any IEM, the treble changes a lot with different tips. Speaking of tips, for whatever reason, I'm almost always the same size tip on both ears for most IEMs, but it is worth noting that on this particular IEM, I preferred a large ear tip on this side and a regular ear tip or medium ear tip on the right side. I think since it doesn't push in quite as far as some other IEMs and sits a little bit more flush, kind of on the outside of the ear a little bit rather than inside, your fitment is going to vary a little bit here. It's worth a shot, and once it fits, it's very comfortable, but it is worth noting it's not quite as a push-in IEM as some others. For mid-range, this is an uncommonly good sounding IEM, I would say. It's very natural and easy on the ears. It's a little bit clean sounding, but with a full body delivery. So you kind of get this feeling of it being relatively neutral, but the lower end vocals feel very full and fulfilled. One of the benefits of that top end kind of 12 to 17K like room information type sound is that the mid-range here stands out a lot from the background. So the layer between the voice that you're hearing right here and the background instruments, that separation is clear as day. And it's one of the things that I think makes this very impressive for its price. Maybe not 100% the best, but it's definitely up there for performance in this particular category. which I like a lot. The voices also have a decent bit of presence. One of the areas that separates this from being my personal preference on voices though, is I wouldn't actually mind personally a little bit more vocal warmth, especially between 400 and 800 hertz. I wouldn't mind that area being pushed a little bit more forward to be a little bit warmer of a sound and less of a clean sound. Now for actual frequency tuning, this is slightly V-shaped actually. But when you listen to it, because the isolation is so good, you don't really notice the voices really taking a backseat. They don't sound like an afterthought at all. They sound very clear and kind of upfront and focused when they are played in an upfront and focused way. When they are kind of, background vocals or something like that, those do take a step back. But when it's recorded intimately, you'll absolutely hear it intimately. When it comes to bass, mid-bass has some excellent tactility to it. The notes, the impacts, the tactility there is fantastic. All those little brain tingle fun things that you hear, those hard hits from like a bass guitar or a drum, those impactful notes come across quite strong on here. There is a little bit of a separation between sub bass and mid bass though, and you almost feel like the sub bass comes from almost like a different driver. It kind of feels like when you have a subwoofer in a system and the subwoofer and the speakers are not perfectly synchronized in their crossover. So there is sub bass there and it feels strong, but it doesn't feel perfectly in line with where the mid bass picks up. And that's kind of how I feel this IEM is. It's got this sort of underlying kind of really deep, rumbly, ultra low notes. And the transition into the mid bass, it kind of just spikes up there a little bit and just kind of starts with the mid bass out of seemingly nowhere and then goes into the lower mid range. And there isn't as smooth a transition as you might be used to seeing. A headphone that has a better transition but isn't as good for bass is something like an IE200. Not nearly as forward in bass as the Alba is. It's quite strong in bass actually, but its transition is, I would say, smoother and it's more obvious, that more linear curve there rather than sort of a double bump. Sound staging, it's got it. Definitely has got it. It's not necessarily special amongst good IEMs at this price category, but I feel like every really good IEM at this price category can do sound staging pretty well, and this sits pretty comfortably within those. It doesn't really have many weak points in terms of like big dips in the sound stage. It maybe perhaps favors the right and left a tiny bit, and not as deep as some others, but others that are a little bit deeper in the forward dimension don't feel as fulfilled in the sides like this does. So there's a bit of a give and take here when it comes to other IEMs. When it comes to comparisons, I mean, it's murderer's row basically that you're comparing it against. There's tons of really good IEMs that have specialties in sound characteristics that are awesome. If you want ultra high precise top end, you can get it. If you want a really thick and syrupy mid-range, you can get that with some other IEMs. If you want balls to the wall soundstage with not that much, bass response, that's available. If you want ultra bass and don't care about anything else, that's also available. This just generally feels like a fairly well-balanced IEM. It doesn't have extreme upsides nor extreme downsides. Now, this is not a neutral IEM. And I think that's okay. This is a well-measuring, fun IEM with some great characteristics, some high-end looks, and not a super high-end price tag. If it's up to me, I think that's a perfectly fine product. And to me, it's cool to see that Meze is not only improving in their headphone division, but coming from a place where I haven't really historically liked Meze's IEMs, I think that this one has changed my mind, and I think they're going in an excellent direction for not only their headphones, but also their IEMs. So those are my thoughts on this. I think that's a very solid performer in this price category, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to somebody who is looking for the type of sound signature that it offers. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.